Hiya, there we are, still available. Here we are, back in the bedroom, and it's the beard, which is growing a little bit more every day and getting itchier and itchier. I'm now questioning the wisdom of doing this, but as the podcast or Poetrycast is called that, I'm going to stick with it. And the back bedroom Poetrycast, so here we are. And I'm taking this opportunity to read out a few poems that I wouldn't normally read out, and revisit a few books as well, and just generally look around my study. I found various things. I found an old Slade patch there, Slade still crazy, which my mum never sewed onto my jeans, and I never did it because I couldn't sew. I've also got a Blue Peter patch, mainly because my daughter, when she was at primary school, sent a poem into Blue Peter. And they wrote back to her and said, you sent your school address in, can you send your home address in? So I wrote on her behalf and said, because she was getting a Blue Peter badge, I said, oh, can I have one as a published poet? And I wrote them a poem, and they sent me that instead, so I didn't get one. And I've also got a badge here, which I'm glad of the spacing there. The pen is truly mightier than the sword. One space difference, that could be a different kettle of fish, couldn't it? Anyway, and I found a little Count Arthur Strong badge there. There's Count Arthur Strong. I've actually got a Count Arthur Strong signed sausage. Not everybody can say that. Anyway, that's nothing to do with the poetry. That's just to introduce things. So, the first poem I'm going to do is a very old poem. I remember I submitted an idea to Macmillan years ago about teachers' pets. And at that point they said, will you write some poems, just an example of what those teachers' pets poems might be like? And I remember thinking, well, I'll write one this afternoon and send it off, and then we can take it from there. And ended up being this poem. It's called Where Teachers Keep Their Pets. There's a nifty little rhyme scheme involving the teacher's name, the type of pet, and where they keep that particular pet. You'll probably get it as we go along. Mrs. Cox has a fox nesting in her sweaty socks. Mr. Sprat's tabby cat sleeps beneath his bobble hat. Miss Cahoots has various newts swimming in her zip-up boots. Mr. Spry has Fred his fly, eating food stains off his tie. Mrs. Groat shows off her stoat round the collar of her coat. And Mrs. Vickers has a stick insect called stickers, and you're ahead of me by now, I realise that. And she keeps it in her, and I was in the school once, and they'll go, knickers, and then for a joke you say, no, she keeps it in a handbag. But she keeps the knickers in a handbag as well, and the handbag's that big, so are the knickers. That was the joke. I did that in one school, and the teachers laughed. I thought, why are they laughing? And the headmistress came up to me later on and said, you realise they're all laughing at me? I said, yeah. She said, do you know why? I said, no. She said, well, that's me. I said, sorry, what's you? She said, they all know that I've got a spare pair of knickers in my handbag. I thought, that's not what I want to know. She said, yes, I'm at that age where if I laugh too much, I might have a little accident. I thought that's more information than I actually needed at that particular point. It was a very small rural school in Lincolnshire, and there'd been a little lad on the front row been laughing. And the teacher said, do you remember the time we took so-and-so to the pantomime? And he laughed so much, he'd had an accident. He had a wee accident. If he was in Scotland, in fact, he had a wee accident on the front row of the pantomime. And he had no underwear with him, of a spare nature. So who in the story so far has got some spare underwear in their handbag? Correct, you're ahead of me. He said, don't worry, you can borrow mine. And this is a true story. So he borrowed the head teacher's knickers. All these things are stranger than fiction, aren't they? You couldn't make that up. Truth. Anyway, talking of truth, I found this book on my shelf, Disgusting Poems. I edited it for Scholastic many years ago. And this started off as a true story. I was in a school, and the teacher came into the staff room at lunchtime. She went, ugh. I said, what's the matter? She went, Lucinda's sick in the sink. I thought, poor Lucinda being sick in the sink. And I thought, there's lots of alliteration and a good rhythm there. Lucinda's sick in the sink. I'll write a poem. And here it is. I hope you've had your lunch a long time ago, or you're not going to have your lunch for a while. You might not want to. Lucinda's sick in the sink. Lucinda's sick in the sink. It's green and yellow and pink. Lucinda's sick in the sink. There's bits of carrot, bits of cheese, bits of sweet corn, bits of peas, bits that look like someone sneezed. Lucinda's sick in the sink. Lucinda's sick in the sink. That sickly stinky stink. Lucinda's sick in the sink. There's lots of liquid, lots of lumps, lots and lots of greasy chunks, lots of gastronomic gunk. Splattered wall, splattered door, splattered table, splattered floor, splattered scatter, splattered more. And the teachers tried to use the mops, paper towels, paper cups, but it never seems to stop, because she just keeps on chucking up again and again, because Lucinda's sick in the sink. Lucinda's sick in the sink. It makes your nostrils shrink. It makes you grimace and blink. It's much worse than you think. That sickly stinky stink. It's green and yellow and pink of Lucinda sick in the sink. Here's a poem I very rarely read out, and I found when I wrote it, it felt very Roald Dahl-y, which is not something I often do, but this is called Bathwaters Run Deep. Dad did not smile. I'll start that line again, because I sort of I burbled it, didn't I, really? Bathwaters run deep. Dad did not smile, nor did he laugh, when seeing the shark fin in the bath. Instead began to fuss and fuss, when tickled by the octopus. His eyes could not believe it real, the shock of the electric eel, and then up popped the toilet lid, shooting out a giant squid. His arms and legs began to flail, until he saw the killer whale. He sat stock still, too scared to move. The swordfish had a point to prove. It did so with a sharpened swish, and then Dad saw the jellyfish that shivered, shook, and grew, so Dad began to shiver too. That was the least of current troubles, when bursting upwards through the bubbles, a mile of oily coils, and yes, it was the monster from Loch Ness. Dad wished he'd washed in just the sink. Bathwaters deeper than you think. He also wished, and this is rude, he was not bathing in the nude. And since he was, his final wish was not to see piranha fish. Alas, these wishes don't come true. Piranha fish swam into view, 1,000 spiky, snapping teeth that started biting underneath. A starfish then joined in the fun. At this point, Dad began to run. So out he leapt with piercing howl, but could not find a single towel. A blur of pink, and he was gone, the crabs and lobsters hanging on. So when you have a bath, take care of monsters lurking everywhere. The moral of this tale will be, it's safer bathing in the sea. Words to live by, eh? And the last poem for today is the one called Books at Bedtime. So we'll go from bath time to bedtime. And this poem started off 20 years ago with a story in a hotel in Hay at the Literature Festival. I was there with my wife and my baby daughter, or our baby daughter at the time, Daisy, and she was about 1 year old. And we were with Julie Donaldson. We were sharing the same publisher, Macmillan, and Julie had just released the Gruffalo. So we'd both done events, we were having a dinner that evening, and we got talking about children because our daughter had colic at the time. So we talked about sleepless nights, we talked about all the times you'd taken the baby seat and the car and driven round at night to get the baby to sleep, or taking the pram out midnight walks, and all the things you do as parents to get your children to sleep. And Julie Donaldson said, oh yeah, we did the same with our children. They could never sleep. We used to walk them with prams, but we never went out of the house. And we said, what? Well, we took all the books off the shelves, so you've got the encyclopedias and the Bible and Dickens and all the rest of it, put them all on the hall floor. Of course, they're all different levels. Put the baby in the pram, and then ran the pram over the books. And that stuck with me, that idea of books at bedtime. And I wrote this poem, and the first time I read it out, I think some kids had said, what's the latest poem you've written? Will you read it out for us? I said, yeah. And I got to the end, and I hadn't really finished it, and the last verse, or the last 2 or 3 lines, came through performance. I won't tell you what it is, but you'll get it when we get there. So this is Books at Bedtime, and written for Julie Donaldson, or with Julie Donaldson's story in mind. Started 20 years ago, finished 2 years ago. There have always been books at bedtime, even as babies, colic afflicted, restless, coughing and crying. There have always been those books especially for that bedtime reading. The Bible, the Beano, Encyclopedia Britannica, Treasure Island, the Dandy, Dickens and Dahl. Classics from every shelf. Stories from a different childhood. Thick, slim, the big, the small, the in-between. Illustrated picture books, sumptuous colours, black and white lines, comic creations. All books at bedtime, lulling the insomniac infant. Not just the reading of these million words, or the telling of these 1,000 stories, or the rhymes of a myriad lines, or the rhythms of this children's garden of verse, as thick and thin lie side by side, arranged on a hall floor. literally a literary cobbled street, for a pram to undulate upon, the rock and the roll of the wheels upon the words, the to and the fro of the springs upon the stories, the osmosis of gentle lullabies as words sing through the pages, in this secret midnight garden where a parent strolls perambulating on these special bedtime books on the long, 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 long road to slumberland. And the wheels and the books go round and round. The wheels and the books go round and round. The wheels and the books go round and round all night long. See you later.